If traveling the province is part of your summer holiday plans, you'll want to listen closely to our next two guests. They're both part of a growing Indigenous-led tourism sector that's sharing with non-Indigenous people across Ontario the food, culture, history, and traditions that have been practiced on these lands for thousands of years. With us now for more, from Chiging First Nation on Manitoulin Island, Neil Debassige, who is a producer on Sportsman Channel Canada's hunting and fishing program, Fuel the Fire TV. He also does fishing charters and cabin rentals on Manitoulin. And in Vaughan, Ontario, Kevin Eshkawkoga, President and CEO of Indigenous Tourism Ontario, and it's great to have you two on our program tonight here on TVO. Kevin, I'll start with you. You've been at Indigenous Tourism Ontario for more than 5 years now. Just give us a sense of how the trend is going in your sector.
Yeah, well, first, Ani Bojo, Steve, Neil, Gigadon and Adishnikaz, Nadona Sing Donjiba, Ganoje Dodam. But you can simply call me Kevin. That's easier for everyone involved. And simply enough, in the last 5 years, we've seen growth. Even with the pandemic, there's been high demand for Indigenous tourism experiences. And that's largely due to a lot of work that's happened over the last 20 years. Some would say over the last couple of thousand years, as we've been hosting guests for that long. So with that being said, over the last 5 years, with a growing demand for experiences and learning more, with more sophisticated consumers, they want to learn the true history of the Indigenous people of Turtle Island, or in our case here in Ontario, which I help represent.
Neil, tell us more about the kind of tourism you do.
For sure. We do a number of things in terms of getting people back to center, if you will. And the biggest part of that is getting them back on the land and back on the water. So we have some cottages that we rent, Airbnb, and we take people out on fishing excursions all over Manitoulin. We can do the North Shore, we can do the South Shore of Manitoulin into Georgian Bay.
Kevin, I wonder if any people in your community look at what you do and don't call it tourism, but rather say you're kind of showing the settlers around. Is there any of that attitude involved?
Well, there definitely is, and there's a lot of different attitudes in many facets. And showing people around, teaching them some of our ways, educating people, that's all a part of Indigenous tourism. I think first and foremost, it's about telling our story on our terms and less about the capitalistic side of the business, which is generating revenue. And sometimes that causes a problem. But yeah, you're right. We show a lot of people around to share a little quick story. One of our chiefs jokingly and in a very fun way with some visitors on a cruise ship said, listen, we only expect one thing at the end of the day, and that's to get back on that ship because we only make that one mistake once. But he's saying that very affectionately to those visitors because they genuinely had to get back on that ship because they were heading to the U.S. after that.
Well, I mean, I get the joke, but I'm wondering, at some point, I imagine the joke comes up that now here's the land you guys stole from us thousands of years ago. And I mean, does that kind of joke come up?
It definitely comes up. We have travelers from all over the world. So a lot of it has to do with educating people on what it is we do here, who we are as, keepers of the land. And we educate first and foremost. And we've got to keep in mind when we're doing tourism, as Neil well knows, it's about, making sure that people enjoy themselves well on a vacation and educating them in a gentle, kind way so that they understand our perspective and become friends and allies of ours.
Got it. Neil, I heard, now you tell me if I got this right, you were a high school principal once upon a time?
Yes, I'm a retired educator. I was a principal for both at the elementary and secondary levels.
Okay, so how did you get from that to what you're doing now?
It was pretty much, what we did anyway. I was doing multiple roles as an educator. We started the rental business back in 2004, and it's an extension of our daily life. I mean, we harvest to eat, and we spend all of our waking hours, or most of them anyway, outside, on the water and on the land. So it really wasn't too much of a stretch, even in education. My qualifications were in the sciences and taught math and science. And then when we moved into, the administration setting, we formed programs around outdoor education. So that was a big focus for the school. And as many people know, land-based education is all the rave currently. So, that continues to be a focus.
And how often, when you're doing your tours, do people say, "Hey, you're that Fuel the Fire TV guy"?
It happens. I mean, it's a niche audience in terms of the hunting and fishing world. When we're trying to get people out, typically, they're first timers to the island and to Manitoulin, and they're just looking for an excursion that they haven't had the opportunity to do. Going out on a charter boat and targeting these bigger types of fish, like any of the salmonoid species, it's a costly endeavor to get set up for that type of thing. So not everyone has that access. And then once we get out there, we just start to slowly incorporate that mindset or that First Nation worldview in terms of gearing the experience around a medicine wheel. And we talk a lot about food sovereignty because that's one of the big reasons that we do go out onto the water, is to harvest and to be able to come full circle, not only stepping into the life cycle of the game that we're chasing, but also then bringing that back in a sustenance type of way, so that you can enjoy that experience all over again with family around a barbecue and the dinner table.
Kevin, you well know there has been a huge uptake in ecotourism, as it's called, and I wonder how that affects what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In my role at the provincial level and in the work that we do, we're here to support fellows like Neil and business operators who want to do good things and share their stories and help educate through educational, interactive, and experiential experiences. So when we think of ecotourism, it seems to be the trend right now, Steve, but in reality, when I first came into the industry for working for the communal good, working for the people, it was at the forefront back in 2002, 2003. And, it's new, but it's not new. And it's just simply a way of our living. And as I said, we've been doing this for thousands of years. And sustainability was a big part of that. And ecotourism, although it's got a fancy name, like most things with Indigenous people, we've been doing some of this stuff for a long time. And I'm quick to say we're some of the original hosts, we're the original scientists, the original doctors. We've done a lot of things here. We're the first at a lot of things. And, when it comes to ecotourism, we've been doing it for a long time before, what we know as our country today or this continent today. We've been managing these lands for a long, long time in a very sustainable manner. And it didn't have fancy names like ecotourism, but we did take care of these lands in a very productive manner, and it provided for all.
Neil, let me follow up with you on this front. Let's say, for example, you're organizing a fishing trip. How is a fishing trip, quote unquote, Indigenous-led or Indigenous-focused, to make it distinctive from any other ordinary fishing trip?
Well, one of the ways that we start our trips off is we have a discussion, obviously, about safety and what we need to do in that regard. But we also started off by making an offering, and tobacco is one of our sacred medicines in Indigenous culture. And so we actually, I want to make a point to start off our fishing trips with that offering, giving thanks, to create this attitude of gratitude notion. And so that we understand that we're giving thanks for the opportunity to experience something from all quadrants of our medicine wheel, from the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, and mental sides. And we don't want people to think that if we had a really good trip and we do an offering at the end of the trip, that it has anything to do with, oh, we better do an offering of medicine for good luck, because that's not the point of that. And so that often starts the discussion, and it eases people into this understanding of what those medicines mean to us, and then how we incorporate that into our everyday life. And fishing is, for us, it's almost an everyday activity, and it's something that we want to get into the habit of realizing and being in the moment, and realizing the importance of awareness about where you are, where your food comes from, and how we can, take matters into our own hands and create this sustainable environment for everyone.
Kevin, I appreciated your previous answer. It's very thoughtful and a great reminder to people about how you are the original stewards of the land and have been caring for these lands for many, many, many centuries. But there are aspects of tourism that are not consistent with good environmental practices. And I think about people who, for example, hop on a plane to get to wherever they need to get to start their tourism journey. And I wonder how you sort of reconcile the negative aspects of what you're involved in, just by virtue of the fact that people have to either get in cars or get on planes to get to where they got to get to, with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's a great comment and question that we need to address collectively as an industry. Often we don't want to talk about the negative impacts of tourism, and we can see during the pandemic that clearly if we travel less, the earth will take care of itself and it'll rebound. And taking as many measures that we can as an industry collectively, the better off things will be and the more sustainable it will maintain itself for everyone to enjoy in future generations. But some of the things that we've started to do to help operators like Neil is we've embraced technology. So as we meet today here in 3 different locations, we've done this sort of thing with our operators. We've embraced technology to do augmented reality, virtual reality, and now we're doing drone shows and different activities that minimize the impact. And that's where we're starting. At the same time, we brought in a professional who's a climate expert to help us measure the emissions that the Indigenous tourism industry puts out, and we'll develop a strategy to go along with addressing that. So this model of tourism that we currently see is not something that we refer to when we talk about what we've been doing for thousands of years, because it isn't. And we all need to collectively address it. And there's a lot of people within the tourism industry doing their own thing to try to help alleviate some of the pressures on the environment that tourism creates.
And then for you, Neil, I can imagine there is a fine line between you wanting to share the experience of being Indigenous and being out in the wilds on the one hand, and then on the other hand, with so-called settler culture, gawking, if you like, at how you do what you do. There's a fine line there. How do you sort of reconcile all of that?
Well, I think when we look at one of the common things that we all have to do every day is eat. And I want people to start asking themselves, from a very from the start of their day, where are they in their food system? And unfortunately, here in Canada, as fortunate as we are to live in this great country, we're number 3 in terms of food wastage. And so when we start asking ourselves, where are we in our own food system? Am I a producer? Am I a harvester? Am I a distributor? Or am I simply a consumer? And if I am a consumer, do I waste? What percentage of my food do I waste? And how do I take matters into my own hands and getting back to the center of that and become a little bit more connected to where my food comes from? Understanding that then leads into a number of other areas, especially conservation. I sit on a board, a not-for-profit board here called Manitoulin Streams, and we work very closely with the public, especially during the tourist high season. But we also work very closely with schools and educating not only First Nation students, but also students, across Manitoulin to talk about stream health. And we do micro hatcheries in schools. Students take an active role during the summer and in early fall in stream restoration. So we have a number of initiatives that we're involved in to really allow people to be, and students especially, to be participants rather than observers.
Well, let me follow up with Kevin on that. Education obviously is a huge part of what you're trying to do here, but are there some aspects of Indigenous life that you think ought to be sort of off limits to non-Indigenous people who you are doing business with?
Yes, and first and foremost, Steve, it's not my individual call to make. It's the call of the community, and it's up to them to decide what's appropriate to share or not. With that being said, we're doing our small part at Indigenous Tourism Ontario. We've got what's called the Indigenous Cultural Integrity Advisory Group. It's individuals made up of people from various nations across Ontario. We've got Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, and Cree individuals sitting on this committee, and they're helping shape integrity guidelines for us to conduct business in a meaningful way and a respectful way, but at the same time not become cultural police, so to speak. So with that being said, we'll help set guidelines. Communities can embrace them as much as they feel fit, but they should also go through their individual processes to identify what they're willing to share. And to each community, it's going to vary. It's going to be different because there's such diverse groups right across Ontario.
Well, Neil, it does make me wonder, because there are people who come from all over the world to come experience Northern Ontario and all of the beautiful things it has to offer and the spectacular Indigenous culture that you are offering as well. But when people say, we've come here for the Indigenous experience, do they actually know what they mean?
Well, I think it's our responsibility to teach them that, and to, for everyone that I've taken out has been completely respectful of the rules on the boat, for one, because they're safety rules, but also it's more of an education piece of I didn't know this. I mean, if you look at the residential school effect and over the course of generations, and in the curriculum of provincial schools, that has been avoided for the most part. And I think it's this education piece that everyone is now more aware of, and that's the start, where we start to have these healthy discussions around, from residential schools to the 60s scoop, or whatever topic they're interested in. I think asking questions and being okay with that is one of those first steps toward reconciliation for all of us.
Kevin, how does that work in your world? Do those issues come up as well?
Absolutely, and everyone's looking to learn. And the surprising thing is, it's hard to put it into words to them what they're going to experience initially with the operators. There's such a diversity across businesses in Ontario and across the country and across Turtle Island that they just want to check a box, typically, Steve, where they see an experience or hear something really cool, and they hear, oh, Indigenous tourism is this really cool thing. However, when they get here, they find that when they meet Neil, it's just the tip of the iceberg doing that, 1 day or 2 day experience with them, where they actually want to learn more, and the hunger starts to grow within them. So it's an amazing thing to see. We've had visitors in some of my other operations where they've come back multiple times to learn about the same thing over and over again. And it reminds me of some of the simple teachings about teachings, is what you hear today may not be what you hear tomorrow, not because the story changed, but because you're at a different place individually, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And from that, you're going to learn something different. So every time they come, even though they might go with Neil, 5 times one summer, the next summer, they might learn 2 new different things. And that's what's really amazing about Indigenous tourism, is it's constantly building. And although we've been, the history of our people has been oppressed for so long, there's so much to share and there's so much to learn, and it takes multiple trips to do so.
Well, Neil, let me ask a bit of a down and dirty business question here, because as much as you two are involved in the business of sharing spirituality and education and memorable lifelong experiences, you are also, at the end of the day, in competition with non-Indigenous businesses that are trying to make a living in the tourism field as well. How much friction is there with other, for example, non-Indigenous tourism operators that you find in the course of doing your business?
That's a great question, and there's 2 ways to look at life. There's this abundance mentality, or there's deprivation theory, and I'm going to choose the former. I'm going to look at it from this notion of abundance, and some people want the First Nation experience, and they gravitate to us. I think we are the center of the universe here. I mean, that's a little egocentric, but when we look at Turtle Island and that heartbeat, and you look at what's at the center, and fresh water is at the center of us as an organism. Well, it's also at the center of Turtle Island, and Manitoulin is that heartbeat. And I think there are so many people wanting to come here and experience. They're just there is a lot of room for growth, and if people want to try. If you look at Facebook and people say, I want to go on a fishing charter, who do I look up? There will be 10 fishing charters. You've got Luke Wasagijik from Was Tours, you've got Brian Still from Stillwater Fishing, and you've got the other non-native businesses as well. And there is enough to go around. We can only take out one group at a time. And now I'm at that stage where I like to do one charter a day, and we run another charter boat with another captain the other part of the day. So it's one of those things where it's not this rat race. It's one of the things. It's a motto that my mom, taught me way back, which was do more of what you love and less of what you don't, and live your life by that rule. And so you get to be fortunate enough. You get to go fishing every day.
Great sentiments. I wish you both well in your efforts to improve spirituality, to educate, and let's say it, and to make some money this summer as well, because that's a good thing too. Neil Debassige and Kevin Eshkawkoga, thank you so much for coming on to TVO tonight. Miigwech, and have a great summer, you two.
Miigwech, Pama.
Miigwech, Pama.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.